Matangi is the Mahavidya of the arts, wisdom, and forbidden knowledge. Now, when I discuss Matangi, it must be understood that she is rooted in the Vishuddhi, but her specific manifestation of the Vishuddhi is of the second order of complexity when assessing the energetic nature of the chakras. When I say second order of complexity, what I mean is that she represents a depth of understanding and expression of the mind that is beyond what most people experience whenever they access the Vishuddhi. The first order of complexity in consciousness is what most people experience either prior to beginning the right-hand path or during their right-hand path initiation. This first order of complexity is colored by certain attachments, most notably attachment to guna. Guna is the metaphysical description of the energetic nature of certain aspects of consciousness which manifest within Maya, or the physical world. For example, we have the tamas guna, which in terms of the chakras is associated with the Muladhara and the Svadhisthana. Everyone is rooted in a specific chakra until they release their attachment from guna. Releasing your attachment from guna is a very rare experience. And so it is very difficult for most people to understand and to experience the second order of complexity in consciousness. The Mahavidyas all represent some aspect of complexity of consciousness that is beyond the first order. And that is why they are so difficult to access, so difficult to understand, so difficult to work with directly. Because in order to really access and understand the full essence of the Mahavidyas, you have to understand second order of complexity and beyond within yourself. Now, when we talk about Matangi and the second order of complexity in relation to the Vishuddhi, we have to understand first what the Vishuddhi represents on the first order of complexity, and then compare that manifestation with the second order of complexity. On the first order of complexity, we can illustrate the nature of the Vishuddhi in many ways. One of the most effective ways to demonstrate the nature of the Vishuddhi is through the solar cycle, as it relates to the chakras. With the Manipura, which is the adversarial state of consciousness to the Vishuddhi, we have the rising sun. This is why the Manipura is associated on the first order with Soma and generating power towards expression. It is the inner fire. We have on the first order of complexity the Vishuddhi associated with the setting sun. So this would be accessing tranquility, calm, introspection, reflection. In terms of presentation of consciousness as it relates to the human life cycle, we have the Manipura on the first order related to youth. And we have the Vishuddhi on the first order related to old age. Now, when we look beyond that first order of complexity that we experience in relation to the chakras, and we detach from guna, we realize that there are manifestations of these chakras that invert these principles and allow us to access the passionate expression of emotion within the belly, or the imaginative expression of the mind within the Vishuddhi, in different ways. This adds richness, complexity of understanding to our lives, to our experience of the cosmos. So, on the second order of complexity, Matangi is a manifestation of the Vishuddhi that represents youthfulness in the mind. The Vishuddhi is no longer associated with old age and pure tranquility. It's no longer associated with sloth and ease of living. In the second order of complexity, the mind becomes fire. Rather than experiencing the setting sun in the mind, there is an inversion. And what you experience with Matangi is the rising sun in the mind. If we apply this culturally within the Indian tradition, we find that on the first order of complexity, although the Aryan tradition is associated with the Manipura and the rising sun, as you delve deeper into the left hand, the Vamashara, and the second order of complexity within the cremation grounds, you find that the rising sun of Aryanism can manifest in many different ways. It can manifest at every single point of consciousness and create pockets of sophisticated culture within the Aryan tradition that allows for that beautiful expression of plurality, which is an essential feature of polytheism. So Matangi represents the rising sun in the mind, youthfulness in the mind, freedom, liberation within that contemplative space that we associate with the Vishuddhi. So rather than the Vishuddhi being understood as a place of blandness and restraint, as many people would experience it on the first order of complexity, the Vishuddhi now becomes a place of bright colors, imaginary vision, liberation, youthfulness that is accessed through a deeper understanding of the pranic channels that exist within the intellectual space of our bodies. Some people have touched upon this, even if it's in a brief instance, by experimenting with psychedelics. For example, when you take LSD, you experience the Vishuddhi not from a place of rational grounding, but from a place of borderless imagination, where all of the colorful expressions of the fire in the mind are brought to light by that rising sun that is now moved out of the belly and into the throat, into the Vishuddhi, into the mind. Of course, if you experience this inversion and you taste the fire in the mind, now the belly becomes a new reference point for you. Instead of the Manipura acting as a place of pure expression, it now becomes a source of grounding. Most people who experience Matangi in her many forms will say that the Manipura is transformed from a place of great liberation to a place of restraint. Because now the seat of liberated expression is in the mind. And so the adversarial point to this on the second order of complexity is the gut. And rather than the Manipura being a place of explosive fire and liberation, as most people would experience it on the first order, the Manipura becomes that new place of rational, earthy grounding. So, when you work with Matangi, you have to understand that you are not working with the mind in the manner that you would experience it in the typical expression, in the mundane expression. You're working with total liberation of the mind. This is why we would associate Matangi with that is a uchista, or leftover. In the cremation grounds, the concept of uchista is very important, because this is the material or the immaterial essence that is poisonous and therefore carries certain taboo and is not typically accessed, at least directly, by anyone who is operating on the first order of complexity within their consciousness. In order for you to be able to access, understand, and utilize that which is uchista, you have to expand your awareness. expand your Chaitanya, expand your understanding of the self and that which surrounds the self to the point where you can truly understand the sophisticated essence of the chakras. And Matangi will test you. She will test you to see whether or not you can understand the music that she plays. She's associated with music. She's associated with the arts. She's associated with the free flight of ideas. She keeps with her a parrot, and her parrot is a representation of beauty as she understands it. Think about the nature of the parrot. Birds in general have a deep association with the Vishuddhi and the mind. They have this free flight in the wind, and of course we associate the air with the mind, elementally speaking. The parrot is an incredibly intelligent bird who represents itself externally through beautiful displays of color, rich displays of color that we can't find in very many places within the natural world. This rich color that seems to be beyond the material plane. It seems to be super real. This is very much in line with the kind of experience that you would have, or most people would have, if they were to utilize something like LSD. With Matangi, you can enter a state of psychedelic exploration of reality that is maintained. It's not just a trip, it becomes life itself when you are a Matangi devotee. And rather than bringing you to a state of total dissolution where you cannot function, such as most people would experience if they were to drop acid every single day, with Matangi, you're able to actualize those expressions of the fire in the mind and utilize them with great specificity to express yourself with freedom. Because ultimately what Matangi represents is purity in artistic expression, purity in imagination. I said that Uchista deals with the material and the immaterial. With a figure like Uchista Ganapati, who is associated with Matangi, we would say that it is the material realm that he primarily deals with. So accepting anything as a sacrifice, anything as puja. With Matangi, it's not so much a focus on the material, but the way that we conceptualize the material and the things that we access within our imagination that may not even be able to be represented materially because they are so far out that we can only understand them in an imaginative context. And there is nothing off limits for Matangi. There is no thought that is considered to be too poisonous to transform into medicine. So if you want to access the depth of free thought, you can do so through Matangi. And this is very freeing for the artist, because there is no area, no stone left unturned, nothing left unexplored within the mind. And because of this, you can access a purity of artistic design that most people never touch. Now, Matangi is associated with the outskirts of society. That is her abode. So why would this beautiful artist exist on the outskirts of society? The fact is, most people are threatened by the pure honesty of the artist who is able to set aside all dogma and all taboo in order to entertain any idea and entertain any expression as a potentiality of beauty. Matangi holds the parrot because the parrot is the free bird. And this is beautiful to her. And so she is willing to aid her devotees in expressing their art in whatever form is dharmic to them, no matter what type of offense it might cause in society. And so by her very nature, she must exist on the outskirts, because people in straight society are not interested in that degree of honesty. They are not interested in that degree of a lack of compromise in artistic integrity, because it reminds them of the compromise that exists within their soul. And it reminds them of the lack of imagination that exists within their soul. And it also forces them to confront ideas and expressions in art that are deeply challenging. And most people are not interested in being deeply challenged in that way. They would rather exist in an echo chamber. They would rather not reflect on the self to such a degree that they would have to identify weakness within the self and maybe do something about it. Think again about the nature of the parrot. The parrot repeats the word, repeats the idea back to the individual that keeps the bird. And so this is a process of reflection. You express an idea, you confront the idea. You create art, you confront the art. The art is reflected back into you, and it becomes a source of power, a source of soma. In the same way that we would look to a goddess like Tarama in the Manipura and say that physical action in the material world, exposing ourselves to danger, creates a reflection within the self that feeds soma and inspires a youthful soul. The same thing is achieved with Matangi through the pranic channel of the mind. And it is because of our ability to access this pranic channel that we can enjoy deeper expressions of beauty in the second order of complexity and beyond.